That seems pretty basic. That seems like a basic truth that we should all be able to agree on. Republicans, by contrast, are recognizing that a constitutional republic depends on the free and open exchange of ideas that we can debate without violence, and that assassinating a political rival is evil, it's wrong, and it should not be glorified or promoted or justified in any way, including in the way that Congresswoman Ilhan Omar did. So Mr. Patel, thank you again for being here. I'd like to, with the remainder of my time, just get your opinion. Does the FBI recognize the rising threat of political violence in America, and what can you guys do to address it?
Yes, we do, and what we can do to address it, Congressman, is we need to get online partnerships with these companies in the public space, on these gaming sites, and on these social media sites. As I was saying earlier, there is no way to triage the amount of information generated on these sites by the FBI alone. And we need the public-private partnership. And there's another law that's expiring, I think, at the end of this month, which I believe we need renewed, that allows private sector companies to report into the FBI without liability for criminal investigatory purposes. And that's the kind of stuff we need to keep going.
Got it. Thank you, Director Patel. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields back.
Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Arizona.
I have some UCs.
Tensions hit a breaking point during a heated congressional hearing as lawmakers confronted the growing problem of political violence across the country. What started as a call for unity soon erupted into a sharp debate after one Republican member revealed how acceptance of such behavior has quietly spread in some political circles. The atmosphere in the room grew tense, with members visibly unsettled as uncomfortable truths came to light, truths that raised serious questions about free speech, accountability, and the state of democracy itself. Before the debate intensified, the focus turned to Charlie Kirk, a well-known conservative commentator recognized for his outspoken views on politics, culture, and faith. While his statements often drew strong reactions, many of his followers viewed him as an unfiltered defender of traditional American principles. Tragically, his name recently surfaced in a deeply troubling online conversation that exposed how divided the nation has become. That reaction sparked outrage and set the tone for one of the most emotional and revealing congressional exchanges in recent memory.
You see request, and then you can, we'll let you go, but we appreciate that. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you again for taking the time, Director Patel, and for Chairman Jordan for holding this hearing. Thank you for depoliticizing the FBI and getting it back to its original mission as well. Director Patel, do you agree that we have a problem in the United States with politically motivated violence?
Absolutely.
And I very much agree. I think we can all agree that political violence is wrong, it's evil, regardless of which side it comes from, and that we can all adamantly and vehemently reject it, or we certainly should. But one of the things that we've noticed recently is that affinity and tolerance for political violence is not equally distributed on both sides of the aisle. In fact, right now, social media is filled with leftists who are cheering on the murder of an iconic conservative political figure, Charlie Kirk. And it's not just random people on Twitter doing this now. There's a YouGov poll released just a few days ago, which stated that 25% of those who identify as very liberal believe that political violence can sometimes be justified. That's far too many, is it not?
A Republican lawmaker from Texas wasted no time taking aim at what he viewed as double standards in Washington. He cited recent polling that showed a troubling trend. About 1 in 4 Americans who identify as strongly liberal said political violence could sometimes be justified, compared to only a small fraction of conservatives who felt the same. With conviction in his tone, he declared that even a single person holding that belief is one too many. He warned that these numbers point to something deeper, a moral decline, a growing willingness to excuse hostility when it serves political goals. His remarks drew a heavy silence across the hearing room. Then came a moment that stunned nearly everyone present. The congressman referenced a social media post shared by Representative Ilhan Omar about conservative commentator Charlie Kirk's passing. In that post, she made a controversial comparison that appeared to suggest Kirk had been responsible for his own fate. The lawmaker condemned the statement as unacceptable, arguing that when elected leaders use such language, it sends the wrong message, that harsh or violent rhetoric in politics is somehow permissible. His rebuke left the room tense, as lawmakers reflected on how far political discourse has drifted from respect and accountability.
It is.
One is far too many.
One is far too many. That's right. Only 3% of very conservatives said the same thing, and we can agree that 3% is far too many. But there's an astounding difference between 25% on the left accepting and tolerating political violence and 3% on the right. I would hope that our colleagues on the other side of the aisle would also recognize that there is a systemic problem on their side of the aisle with tolerance for violence against people with whom they politically disagree, that there is a cultural rot on their side of the aisle that needs to be addressed desperately. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
One of the more astounding aspects of this is that it's not just people. This comes from the very top, from their political leaders. Just a few days ago, a member of Congress of this body, Ilhan Omar.
That number is simply too high, the lawmaker said firmly. Even one person thinking violence is acceptable is one too many. He noted that while around 3% of conservatives shared that view, nearly 25% of those on the left did, a gap he called alarming. That he urged his colleagues across the aisle to recognize the deeper issue behind those numbers, a growing culture of tolerance toward hostility against political opponents. It's a serious problem, he warned, and it needs to be confronted before it spreads further. Another member agreed, saying simply, yes. The lawmaker then added that this attitude doesn't come only from citizens, it often starts with political leaders themselves. He reminded everyone that just days earlier, Representative Ilhan Omar had made remarks that, in his view, reflected that very problem.
Shared a video on her social media account about Charlie Kirk's murder, and I'll quote what it said. It said, "Charlie Kirk was Dr. Frankenstein, and his monster shot him through the neck." In other words, Charlie had it coming to him. The words that he said naturally led to his assassination. I mean, that is a reprehensible thing for a member of Congress to say, to suggest, to promote in any capacity. And there are people across this country who are losing their jobs for far less than this. And that, by the way, is a just response to acceptance and tolerance of political violence. It's amazing to me that the political left today, who were the originators and the cheerleaders of cancel culture, now have the backbone to attack conservatives for defending their assassinated friend. But there's a key difference here. Democrats want to silence conservatives for speaking obvious, self-evident, ontological truths like that men aren't women and men can't get pregnant.
The congressman made a strong point that struck a chord with many watching nationwide. He argued that if a Republican had made similar remarks about a Democrat, the story would dominate headlines for weeks. But because the comments targeted a conservative, most media outlets stayed quiet. To him, that silence showed a clear double standard, a system where outrage depends on political leanings, not fairness. His remarks echoed the frustration many conservatives feel, that their concerns are often ignored while similar behavior from the left is excused. When asked about the growing threat of political violence, FBI Director Patel confirmed the danger is real and increasing. He said the Bureau works with social media platforms to track potential threats but admitted it's an overwhelming challenge. The congressman pressed further, questioning whether the FBI applies equal scrutiny to all sides, a question that remained unanswered but clearly resonated in the room.
What I do know for sure is that, Charlie was someone who once said, guns save lives after a school shooting. Charlie was someone who was willing to debate and downplay the death of George Floyd in the hands of Minneapolis police.
I think he called him a scumbag.
right, have no regard, downplay slavery and what Black people have gone through in this country by saying Juneteenth should never exist. And I think, there are a lot of people who are out there talking about him just wanting to have a civil debate.
Complete rewriting of history.
Yeah, there is nothing more effed up, than to completely pretend that his words and actions have not been recorded.
The divide between both sides couldn't have been clearer. Conservatives, as the congressman said, continue to defend open debate and free speech, believing disagreements should be resolved through discussion, not hostility. Some Democrats, he argued, have embraced a culture of silencing opponents and labeling dissent as intolerance. The congressman warned that this shift shows how easily moral lines can blur when politics replaces principle. As the hearing ended, the message reached far beyond Congress. Political violence, he said, isn't a partisan issue, it's a threat to democracy itself. When leaders mock tragedy instead of condemning it, they erode the trust that binds the nation together. His closing words were firm: if debate gives way to destruction, America's moral foundation will crumble. Inside the chamber, Republicans voiced outrage, while most Democrats remained silent, a silence many saw as proof that loyalty to party now outweighs basic decency. Outside Washington, the reaction was swift. Citizens across social media expressed disbelief that an elected official would treat such a moment so lightly. Even moderates and independents agreed that the remarks had crossed a moral line. The congressman argued that words from public figures matter, and when leaders use demeaning or divisive language, they normalize hostility. What made it worse, he said, was the mainstream media's quiet response. While smaller outlets covered the story, most major networks barely mentioned it. To many, that showed a clear double standard: outrage for some, silence for others. The hearing also raised questions about how the FBI monitors political threats. Director Patel described partnerships with social media companies but admitted the challenge is complex. The congressman urged the Bureau to act fairly and investigate threats from all sides, warning that bias only deepens public distrust. In the end, the hearing wasn't just about one person or one comment. It was about what kind of nation America wants to be. The congressman reminded everyone that division destroys more than reputations, it tears apart communities and values. His final message was simple but urgent: democracy can't survive when hostility becomes acceptable. The choice now, he said, is between moral courage and moral collapse.